Hey guys, it's Cassandra Williams. This is Fast Track Friday, where you get a Cassandra's capsule, a dose of information that will definitely help for leaders, right? Today is for principal leaders. So today is sponsored by the wonderful PM Phase, right? India Brown over there. She's great project manager. She does business consulting. Thank you, India Brown, for sponsoring this show. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Today, we're going to talk about conflicts, right? How do leaders navigate conflicts as school administrators? I think the struggle is many times we have to kind of be the mediator of peers, be the mediator of our teachers, of our leaders, of our coaches, right? Really being able to navigate that to support growth within the school and make sure you are working towards growth and you are not the barrier or hindering. So, okay, so we know there are four common conflicts within education, right? So we know we have arguments from staff, there's disputes, of course, disagreements of teaching methods, of why I should teach this in the classroom and why not. That's why having an instructional leader that has a strong background in curriculum is very helpful. And even workload, how much is too much for one person to have as a workload? And then, of course, curriculum, right? If there's not policy in place for things like this, then of course there are going to be some challenges. Thinking about what are the different perspectives, different lens, different ways to teach the standards, right? That could be a stir for concern. Of course, your student issues and how what is fair to one student definitely has to be the same for others. Really thinking about that, and once you set precedent with one student, just being able to follow through. And then, of course, your parents. I think right now, some principals may say that parents are their biggest concern, but I go on the fence and ask them, when have you ever interacted with them other than this instance? So really looking at tension over student, discipline, looking at like academic performance, what is okay and what's not. And then your communication breakdowns. Where's the communication breakdown? I always say, if you are there at the beginning of the year and constantly working with parents and families, then they are more likely to include you in some of their concerns. Okay, so what happens when we have unresolved conflicts? Of course, people leave. Nobody wants to stay in a place that they are like not heard, not valued. And this is a sign of not being valued. You're not serving as a mediator for my concern. So really understand why teachers are leaving. And I always say you have to have surveys at the end of a teacher or a staff's term to really get to the root of it. Now, I'm not saying please do not interview your staff, but have an outsider or somebody that, understands relationships and can best ask these questions to get to the root of it, because I can guarantee whatever the concern of that teacher, why they left, could be the concern that the building is having. Okay. And think of low productivity. If I am an educator and I feel that I am not valued, am I going to put in 110% if I know me and you are having beef or we're having conflict? So always consider that, right? I'm going to do the bare minimum. I am not going to volunteer for the things you need. I am not going to help the PTO. But on the other hand, if you pour into me, if you are constantly solving my problems and my concerns, if I am on your mind, I will go 110%. I will walk through walls. I will volunteer. So thinking about who's volunteering in school, who are your favorites, right? Because we know we have favorites. And then who are the people that you need to support a little bit more? And then, of course, decrease morale, right? When the building, there's like a culture of the building to where we're like, oh, am I satisfied in this space? Are there other opportunities? And then when the morale is low, everything seems like a conflict. There's like fires you're putting out every day, every week. So really thinking about, what is my culture concern? Like what are the walls? I always like to say, when we go and work with schools, when I walk through the schools and I kind of say, what are the walls telling me? What are the students telling me? And what are the teachers telling me? Just always have a pulse on those type of ideas. Okay. how do you de-escalate, right? What do you do that will work to de-escalate situations, right? Of course, we know it's active listening. I remember as a leader, I had a parent come in my office, angry, irate. So one, I gave him about 10 minutes to kind of cool down. And then two, I deeply apologize. I had another parent and I want to make sure I heard them, right? Then I walked them into a space, office, and then I just listened. I didn't even speak. I listened and then I asked questions because I really want to understand the parent and the parent's perspective and how I could best support this parent in that manner. Of course, by the time she had expressed her issues, she just wanted to be heard. And we together solved some of the issues that she had. And, granted, looking back, that parent was my best advocate. She would come volunteer, she would come open the door, she would come do like events. So, really thinking about how do you pour into the people that really want to address their concerns. So, giving them full attention, full eye contact. Sometimes I think the desk is a barrier, a more of a hierarchy. So even sitting a little like cat a corner from them, making sure you're not in the position of power at that point, and just understand where they're coming from. And then, of course, move conversations, private spaces. I think we all know that. But being able to ensure they're comfortable in their, in where we're sitting. Emotional regulation, be able to like understand the tone that they're having, your reactions, right? This is not the time to clap back looking at these models. And really, having calm shoulders, intent leaning in, being able to control the pace as well. And then thinking of your boundaries, being very respectful in this time, and then a time limit. Say, man, I have another meeting in about 10 minutes. My goal, you right, and starting off with that. Hey, I am so grateful you came to meet with me. I have a meeting at this time. I'm very excited that you came to talk to me. I really want to hear, how I could best support you and your child and working at the school and, at the school. Okay. And then of course, redirect, being able to identify when it is escalated, and do gestures towards what does it mean to be escalated. If you don't think you can calm down or work with the parent in that type of manner, we know then it's like, okay, after my 10 minutes of coming out, she's not calm. Okay, door open. My aide, somebody has to come in and be a witness, and, we are both like supporting her in the manner, right? So thinking about that. Okay, and then I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence on my show. If you have not watched David's show with Ortiz, she did a wonderful job thinking about like emotional intelligence and really being able to understand yourself, understand your triggers, because what is happening with emotional intelligence, your triggers comes out as well through the school and it sets precedent. So you don't know if teachers are walking on eggshells because of you, right? Really being able to recognize that, and understand your biases. We all have biases, and monitor your emotional response. Like, what does your poker face look like at all times? Being able to read the room is important, right? Your social awareness. What is the group dynamic? Sometimes it means I'd like to record to kind of see, the side eyes are like, oh, if we got to do this again, right? You could definitely see that when sometimes, like I said, I record the space to be able to identify, like, what am I missing? It was one time, it's so funny, I got to share this. One time I was presenting, and sometimes I like to record. I don't like to record all the time, but I recorded. And then I was presenting and I was wondering why people were laughing. And so eventually, I was like, I kind of looked at the recording, then I asked a couple of my teachers, I'm like, why were you, everybody was laughing during this time. She was like, oh, let me tell you, right? So being comfortable enough to talk to teachers, but she was like, because, your text to speech that you do when you kind of present to us, it said vagina when you said something else, right? So I was just like, oh my goodness, right? Thinking about that, and addressing that in my next meeting. So really being able to understand the nonverbal clues that people are giving off, and then other underlying issues. I know with principals, you have to have the withedness. You have to be able to know when something is off. And then have relationships. I'm always saying you got to pour into people. You put emotional deposits in their bank account all the time. And if you're doing that, you'll build trust amongst your staff. You'll be able to communicate with compassion, right? When somebody's dog dies, be like, hey, I just heard, I'm so sorry. I know that was your favorite pet, and being able to be heard is very important. And then you can be able to foster different solutions once you have relationship with various people. Okay. So I hope you are into this, because I love where we're always talking about how do we communicate effectively. Okay, now think about mediation techniques. What happens when, right? Is there a system even at place at your school when there is a conflict? So really thinking about, what are your rules, your ground rules? Are they in a mediation room? And so what are the expectations? So you're respectful. How do you facilitate that? Are you the principal facilitating that because you have biases, right? So thinking of who's the facilitator of the conflict, and then thinking about how each party can share, and really thinking about emotions and being able to display and being able to navigate that. Okay. And then identify, of course, your core issues, well, our policy, but really being able together to generate solutions that will be a win-win, right? Stephen Covey. We're a big fan of Stephen Covey. What is the win-win when you are an effective mediator in these solutions? Because you definitely, either some of my leaders do not feel comfortable by themselves mediating a situation. So what some of my principals like to do is like pull in their counselor, maybe one counselor, to kind of help them navigate and use the language to mediate the situation. And then I know, let me just be really transparent. Sometimes these things are sticky. So in the state of Indiana, I hate to say this, but in the state of Indiana, as long as one person knows it's being recorded, it's kind of okay. But I sometimes will record, you can record through your phone, the whole mediation, and kind of see where it fell apart, or see where you could have redirected the situation to get better with your practice, right? Being able to understand some of these things are good to go back to, as well as talk to your counselor about some of the things that happened and how we could have best resolved that. Okay, here we go. We're 12 minutes in. Conversation framework, right? State the obvious. You always start with I. We try not to bring any other perspectives. I noticed, I discuss, I see, right? Use with, you're curious at this point because you're asking questions, trying to get to the root of the concern, right? What are your thoughts about this? What are your concerns about this? And then, of course, your suggestion, but hey, you can always ask for teachers, do they have a suggestion? Or, hey, how about we try this? Does that work? And then they'll say yes or no, it doesn't work because, and you'd be like, oh, okay, I can definitely see where you're coming from. And then we work through a solution. And many times, teachers, let me just say, we are people pleasers, but on the other perspective, we are also solution driven. You ask a teacher multiple solutions, they are coming to you with multiple solutions before they ask or they have a concern. So really understanding that they are coming to the table with solutions based on the situation, way before you call them in, right? They've already thought of multiple solutions to solve their own problem. And then agree. What is the documentation that we agree to plan and check in to make sure that we actually did the thing that we said we're going to do, right? Holding ourselves accountable. And then it holds you accountable too, to kind of check in with them and be like, hey, it's that Friday we said we would check in and kind of see what's going on. Did it work? Did we do the thing? All right, so here's the 4 conflict resilient staff. Again, a culture of respect. If you're respectful, and modeling that respect and daily communications. Now, I've been in situations where some of our leaders can be petty, and when they feel that a teacher is against them or advocating on something that they want, they kind of feel that, well, I'm not going to celebrate them for this. So really think about your own biases, because teachers know sometimes who are the favorites, who will not like. So really being able to have a culture of respect, and be able to support them and model that behavior and that communication daily, even with the teachers that you call are, you feel that are not in that space. Okay, and then skill development. Constantly develop your emotional intelligence skill. Provide regular training on communication, conflict resolution if you see there's a need. And then there has to be a clear policy or process, because it can't be that teacher A has this conflict and she gets this treatment, and then teacher B, oh, that's teacher B, well, she'll figure it out, right? You have to really think about what are your processes, and do teachers know what do they do when there's conflict, as opposed to coming to you or just crying in your office or emailing you, right? What is the process? And be upfront about that process, so there is systems in place and policies in place around that. And then, of course, building community. What are you doing outside of the building to make sure that everybody feels welcome and that they want to be there at your school site? So really strengthen team building activities. Think about, what are your PDs? What are you doing to ensure that everybody is included and everybody feels welcome? All right. Now, when do you seek additional support? Well, okay, Cassandra, yeah, well, we did that. This is not working, really. Okay, so now you are maybe into the legal implications. This is where I say sometimes a principal cohort is crucial. You should have a team of leaders that you are constantly talking to. Principals should have mentors, coaches, everything, right? Thinking of who you reach out to, say, hey, is this a part where I need to take legal recourse? Who are my district council that needs to get involved? What are the policies and rights behind this, so I have legal rights? And then making sure, if there is something that you think may be a sticky situation, you kind of front load the legal counsel before and say, hey, I'm having this incident. I just want to give you a heads up, right? So they're abreast of what is going down. You do not want to call them and reach out to them when shit's already bad, right? Things in the news, right? It's really bad. So really think about, how do you let them know kind of what's going on. Not every time, but in the places where you think might get sticky. Of course, mental health concerns as well. You have the resources, you have the school counselors, but we need mental support as well. So think of, like, I'm not saying, all the time go to somebody, but think of who are the therapists, who can you talk to, because being a leader is a lonely space. So sometimes you need to just vent and talk to somebody about the things that are happening in your space, and all that can cause mental stress. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. Wellness is very important. And then, of course, your school counselors will help with that support, sometimes if it has to do with students. And then there's repeated people, right? And when you have the repeated offenders, of course, think about, what is your external mentor that will come in and support with this. And then after multiple attempts, then what, right? What is your process or procedure, and what do you have to do? And then systematic issues, thinking of like DEI support, diversity. When you're looking at equity, is this through the lens of diversity? And think, when patterns consist, what do you do, and who do you reach out to with the district that will support you with that? Okay, I hope that helps. And then last but not least, I think this is last. Yes, it is last, but really creating your conflict resolution plan, right? You have to really assess what is going on. So now a lot of people at this time are taking the panorama survey. Like, what are you using to assess your conflicts? Being able to identify surveys. What surveys are you putting out? What are your procedures that need to be tweaked because this conflict resolution policy didn't work, right? Really thinking of that. And what is the design process? What are the protocols? Being able to establish frameworks that support this, and thinking about the pathways that you will take. And then review. You're always, in any plan that you have to review, revise, regularly adjust if needed. And then, of course, training is necessary. Like, if you are going to have a third-party person come and support conflict, then you need to have training based on the culture of your school. So really thinking about those things as great ways to really understand, how do you best support this conflict and resolution. I hope this helps. I hope this was a dose. This was Cassandra's Capsule Fast Track. Again, thank you very much. PM Phase Business Consulting. I appreciate you, India Brown. So have a wonderful rest of your Friday morning. Bye.